boys. I'll suck your cocks if you let me out.
Too much?
Suitable
Flesh.
All right, so Horror DNA TV out there. We are here with the legendary screenwriter, the one and only Mr. Dennis Paoli, a man who's married to the mythos. How are you doing this evening, Dennis?
Well, I'm not sure we're married. I think we sort of go out, we go out on the sly every once. I think I'm the backdoor man. I think,
Okay.
I sneak in on the mythos whenever I can,
Definitely, definitely. All righty. Well, we got suitable flesh up to bat here. I have screened it and reviewed it, loved it, absolutely loved it.
Terrific. Thank you so much. That's what we do it for. We do it for you guys. We do it for, the people who are gonna, who are gonna go. You're gonna go to a horror film and expect to get up and yell at the screen and stomp on the floor. That's what we're shooting for. If we get anywhere near that, that's our beat.
Definitely achieved that one without too much trouble. So I know Suitable Flesh is essentially a rewrite of a script that you and Stuart Gordon had tried to get off the ground decades ago for The Thing on the Doorstep. What have been the major differences between the end result and the OG, so to speak?
There's some significant differences, but the story is pretty much the story we decided to tell back in the mid '90s. The script has a storied history. Stuart was in Europe making Castle Freak and then Dagon, and we were looking at what was the next film we would like to do. And of course, we were looking at Lovecraft adaptations. So we both really like the story, The Thing on the Doorstep. We think it's one of, in terms of plotting and a really tight three character story, it's one of Lovecraft's best.
Yes,
And it was, and Stuart was just making Dagon, and Dagon is a huge story. Dagon took on the very impressionistic, suggestive little story Dagon and the Shadow over Innsmouth, which is a giant tale. But Thing on the Doorstep was what was going in a different direction, and we thought we wanted to do that. So he said, "Why don't you take a whack at writing a script while he was gone?" And I did. I wrote a script, and I made some changes. We usually update Lovecraft. We always felt comfortable updating Lovecraft because he was so prescient, by which I mean his understanding of science and his understanding of the troubling social issues. He was troubled in them in ways that are very controversial today. And,
for sure, yeah.
But they're the same issues. There are many of the same issues. So Lovecraft, we always felt Lovecraft was current no matter when we read him. We had been reading Lovecraft together back in high school when we met each other. We were very familiar with many of the stories, and this one really seemed to be right in Stuart's wheelhouse, where he really there was more narrative to Thing on the Doorstep than there was, for example, to Shadow over Innsmouth. Shadow over Innsmouth is one character's story about delving into his unknown genetic past. There's a couple of other fantastic characters in the story, but it's really the narrator's story. Thing on the Doorstep, it has a narrator, but he's looking in on these two other fascinating characters and their very strange marriage. And since it's a story, and I'm going to give too much away to your audience, but hey, spoiler alert. It's a mind swapping story, which makes it, of course, a body swapping story. But in this case, Lovecraft was again very prescient in making it a gender swapping story. So the whole idea of mind swapping fundamentally is suggested to me a psychological context. The context of making one of the characters psychiatrist, because the basic fundamental to Freudian psychology, Freudian psychiatry, is psychotherapy is that the patient, the terribly troubled person looking for help with their psychosis goes to a psychiatrist and transfers their and displaces their psychosis, their troubled relationship onto the therapist. The therapist takes on that troubled relationship and then helps to work the patient through it. Well, that whole idea of transference is very much like mind swapping. So that I made one of the main characters a psychiatrist, and the rest of it all fell together. And Stuart came back and he liked the script, and he schlepped it around Hollywood in Burbank, and it was optioned, but we couldn't get the funding. So he took it around again, and it was optioned again in the early 2000s. But again, they couldn't raise the financing to make the film. And one more time, about 5 or 6 years later, a couple of actors were interested in playing the parts, and they optioned it. And again, they couldn't raise the money. They couldn't get it made. And the feedback that the producers and that we were getting each of those times was the same. We can't make this film because, and I'll let you guess why.
Oh, yeah.
What do you think?
I would imagine it's just the sheer amount of sex and sexuality that's in it. It's a very sexual story.
Right in one, absolutely. You win the prize. If there was a prize, and so financiers kept saying, "Oh, there's too much sex." And Stuart and I would look at each other and we would go, "We don't understand that. We don't even understand that sentence."
Right?
What exactly are you talking about? Isn't this Hollywood? Did we make a mistake someplace? So again, the script sat in a drawer I just put it in a drawer with some other undone projects. And then when Stuart passed away, really unfortunately at the beginning of the pandemic, I did a couple of Zoom memorials for him. And at a couple of them, I reconnected with Barbara Crampton, who was famously in a number of our films, did great work, is a historically important scream queen, besides being an actress of significant note in a number of different genres.
Oh yeah.
And she had become in the last decade or so a producer, again, a low budget horror producer. And she said, "Do you have any?" When we reconnected, she asked if I had any scripts in the drawer, and I pulled out a thing on the doorstep, dusted it off, and sent it to her. And she loved it. She was able to, we made an agreement. She shopped it around. She was able to connect Joe Lynch to direct, which pretty much assured that it was likely to get made. Joe has a real reputation. He makes movies. Joe gets films made. Joe makes movies. And yes. And when he connected Heather Graham, well, that was it. Then the movie was going to get made. But he suggested another twist, another gender swap in the story as it was structured, to change a couple of the genders of the characters themselves, which again is faithful to the spirit of Lovecraft. It is a gender swapping story. So because we gave it one more twist and twisted the genders, we were maybe not being faithful to the letter of Lovecraft, we hardly ever are, but we always think we're faithful to the spirit of Lovecraft. And again, in this case, I think we were. And it really sort of refreshed the script for me. You know, when the script is to 20 some years old, you know, it might get a little stodgy in your imagination. Plus, you also dig your heels in. Why wasn't this made before? This is a good script. What's wrong with this? There's nothing wrong with this script. And the fact is, when Joe made this really, you know, a significant change, I said, sure, let me take a look at that. Let's see if that works. And it still told the same story. It told the same story. The same story fitted perfectly, but the characters were suddenly more interesting, and they were more interesting to me. And Joe and Barbara both felt they were more current. And the script ended up working just as well, if not better. And you get a couple of terrific actresses like Heather Graham and Barbara to play the parts, and it's a joy. You know, let me say one thing about Barbara. I've said this in a couple other places, but you know, doesn't she look good? Doesn't she look
unbelievable?
Doesn't she look exactly the same as she did in, you know, in the late 80s and 90s when she was doing, you know, Deal with the Devil. I'm saying it's a deal with the devil. You know, she's, you know, it's spectacularly, you know, plus her talent is just off the charts. So, and her talent, it turns out, as a producer is terrific. She gets movies made. She got this movie made when Stewart couldn't. And you know, that's not nothing. That's special.
It's a bold statement, yeah.
Very great, very grateful to Barbara. Wonderful to work with her again. Brian's got a credit on this. It was great to work with Brian, and Brian used them. Great to work with Brian again. And it was terrific to start to meet and work with Joe Lynch. That was special too. Joe's got the chops. You know, Joe can get, you know, good. He can do one of those things that Stewart did, which was reach out of the screen, grab you by your shirt collar and shake you. You know, I mean, Joe is not just a worthy successor, but a terrific filmmaker in his own right.
Yeah, you guys definitely seem to have that same magic that you had with Stewart. I was going to say, what are the qualities of Joe that makes him so good? It's almost seamless, the transition. It feels like something you and Stewart could have made. You know.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, you know, Stewart is he's not only inspirational to filmmakers who like and respect his work. He was a generous mentor. He was, you know, Joe knew Stewart. You know, Joe met Stewart, and Stewart was very generous with his time with young directors. He loved working in the business. He really liked work. He loved working with actors. He was a real actor's director. He came from the theater, and he always loved being around actors, being around their energy and their talent. And he really liked sitting down with young directors. You know, Stewart would always want to take you to lunch. You know, you want to go to lunch and meet Ray Bradbury? Sure, Stewart. Yeah.
Wow,
so,
okay.
I mean, it was always, these restaurants in Burbank, he knew every one. So, you know, he would always take the young guys were always welcome to his office. He would always take them out to lunch. He was very generous with his genius. So there's just, that whole idea of, I don't think Joe just recapitulated what Stewart could do. He also was able to, again, be faithful to Stewart's spirit while giving it his own stamp. Joe has, to some degree, a somewhat different style. Stewart's, I've said this a couple of times too, but watch Stewart's films. When I met him in high school, he was an art student. Stewart used to draw at the beginning of his career, he used to draw his own storyboards. So Stewart was a visual artist. And watch his films. The frames themselves are some of the most beautiful pictures you will see. They're creepy as hell, and they may be spewing blood, but look at stop a film, hit pause every once in a while when you're watching a Stewart film and look at the frame. It's gorgeous. Stewart made great frames. Joe is a student of film. Joe knows every filmic technique, every trick in the book. He doesn't use them all. He just uses the ones that tell the story, that serve the narrative being told. But look at his film. There's mad camera work in that film.
I love the iris shots. I love the iris shots. Had a very
irises, cool split screens. A couple of reviews have said he's also influenced by De Palma, and I think you see that too.
Oh yeah, totally.
De Palma was totally fearless in using every film technique he at his disposal. And sometimes he just did them for fun. Joe always does them for a purpose. But he's got the chops. He's a real student of film, and it's made him the filmmaker he is.
Yes, sir. He's done some interesting things in the film. One of the things I said in my review that'll be aped over and over again was the scene with the car.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that was Joe's idea. I mean, the car was always there. The car was, wanted to. That was in the original script.
That's what I was going to ask.
If you go back to the mid-90s, they didn't have the console that the cars have now. They didn't have the rear view. The backup view. That's. So add that, and boom, you get. It's a film within a film. It's on the one hand, it's a trick shot. On the other, it's what you would see. It's exact.
Yes, it is.
It's realistic at the same time as being funny. It's a joke. It's a joke at the same time that it's horrific. And that's what that is in the spirit of what Stewart and I always tried to do. We always tried to walk that line, that very strict line between horror and humor. Horror can roll over into humor when you do it too much, when you don't believe in it, when you don't, when it's over the top and crazy, and humor can be horrible when you understand that what it is the release of tension. They're both, horror and humor are both the release of tension. And that's always the story we wanted to tell. We wanted to walk that line of that tension and release it in terms of horror and humor. And if it works right, both at the same time. Joe does that a number of times in this film.
And does it very well at that.
Very well.
I noticed you said Brian Usna was credited as an executive producer. What was his influence on the film and the script? I know you guys have such a comfort level after all these years working together.
Brian worked closest with Barbara, and sort of he worked through Barbara. All these guys are LA guys. I live in New York. That's always been the case. I'm the writer, so I'm the first person off the project. Thank you very much. And, thank you for the script. And then you don't hear anything for 8 months. And then it's like, hey, that script you sent us, we made a movie, what do you think? Well, it's good. I sort of got Brian's notes through Barbara. But I had recently seen Brian. I had, when I went out for, there was a live, once the pandemic was kind of passed, had passed far enough, I went out to LA for the live memorial for Stewart. and Brian was there, and my wife and I, we hung out with Brian uh, a couple of days, and it was great to see him again. And we talked about a number of projects, and it was just sort of like, since it was a Lovecraft adaptation, Barbara felt she wanted Brian's perspective on it, and and Brian's, one of the things I give Brian credit for, he's the true believer. When Stuart and I, when he sort of discovered Stuart as a filmmaker, he saw Stuart's theater work and said, and he had wanted to produce a movie, and he saw Stuart's theater work and said, this guy's ready to direct a movie. Stuart's theater, the Organic Theater in Chicago, was very much a storytelling theater. It was a powerfully narrative theater. Going to a show at the Organic was like going to see a movie on stage with live actors. So Brian felt very comfortable saying, Stuart, let's make a movie. And at the time in the 80s, you could either make, if you wanted to make an independent low budget movie, you either made a comedy or a horror film. And we made a horror film, but Stuart was one of the funniest guys you would ever meet. Stuart was hilarious. When we were in high school, we had a comedy group. We had a satire comedy group based on the work of Second City in Chicago, where we grew up. So Stuart was always looking for the laughs. And nobody liked to laugh more than Stuart. Nobody told a better joke. But Brian was the true believer in horror. Brian was, he was seeped in the genre. Now, my day job for 49 years was teaching and running writing programs at Hunter College in the City University of New York. And for 20 years, I taught Gothic fiction. So I've been seeped in the Gothic as well. I know it well. But Brian still was the true believer. So, but Barbara felt comfortable, running it by Brian. What do you think? And Brian wanted a tweak here and a tweak there. Can we ratchet this up? Can this go a little faster? Sometimes it could, sometimes it can't. When you're the screenwriter, there's only so many things there's only so many rewrites you can do. If Brian was involved at all, I would always listen to Brian. I've gotten notes from lots of producers, but Brian's notes are, Brian's a director himself. Yes. Brian's notes are, are to the point. They will help you get the movie made, and they're about how a director looks at the script. So, I would always listen. I would always listen and take Brian's notes really seriously.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Kind of hard to beat that mind. Well,
yeah.
You're inarguably the go-to screenwriter, in my opinion anyways, for Lovecraft material. And so many other people have a tendency to get it wrong or get it campy or maybe miss the mark. What's your trick to overcoming that narrative challenge of adapting Lovecraft? Because it seems to be tricky for a lot of people.
It's tricky for us. It's, it's tricky. That's why it seems tricky because it's tricky. Lovecraft's a genius. As I said, I taught Gothic fiction for 20 years, and I rarely taught Lovecraft because I just didn't get to the 20th. I really didn't get to the 20th century. But when I talk to people about Lovecraft, I would say he's one of the great impressionists of American literature, by which I mean his stories are very suggestive.
Yes.
They're impressionistic. You see the effect of the horror without seeing the horror itself all the time anyway. He describes the Shoggoth here and there, but in such odd terms that it's, you can almost imagine them for yourself, and that's what you're supposed to do. That's what Lovecraft wants you to do. He wants to engage your imagination. So you're imagining the most horrible thing you can imagine. More horrible than maybe not more horrible than Lovecraft could imagine. He was
It'll be hard.
He was haunted by cosmic horror. But the fact is, he wanted you to be haunted by cosmic horror. So he had to invite you in. When you make movies, you have to be expressionistic. You can't be impression. You have to be you have to show it.
Yes.
At some point, you have to show it. So we actually we took Lovecraft at his word. It was, okay, you want us to imagine the worst that we can imagine? Here you go. Here it is. When we did From Beyond, we told the entire Lovecraft story of From Beyond in the pre-credits sequence.
I was going to say right up front, in the first 5 minutes.
Yeah. The rest of that film is what we imagined from Lovecraft, reading Lovecraft's story, from telling Lovecraft's story. And if you notice, Barbara plays Barbara plays the lead in that film, and she's a female psychiatrist, just as she is in Suitable Flesh. So I felt very comfortable in writing Suitable Flesh, writing her part in Suitable Flesh this time, because it was something, it connected very much to what we'd done before. But, Lovecraft you have to be, to some degree, fearless when you take on Lovecraft. You have to believe that you're being faithful to the spirit of Lovecraft, even if you're not faithful to the letter of Lovecraft, because you're translating it into another medium. So you have to believe that Lovecraft would have wanted you to move in this direction, to go in this direction, to let your imagination take you to these most horrid places. I think we got the character of Herbert West right from the Reanimator stories. That's who Herbert West was. I think we got his character absolutely right.
Sure.
But he doesn't do everything in our film Reanimator that he does in all the stories. We picked and chose from the 5 or 6 6 Reanimator stories. We picked and chose from those Herbert West stories, events we wanted to put in the film, and then we made that narrative. But the character is faithful to the Lovecraft's character of Herbert West. And the character of Dan is faithful to the narrator of those stories, who's so troubled by West, but is also fascinated by West. So we wanted to read carefully. Again, I'm a student of literature, so I was a student of Lovecraft. And, the other thing is that, I got to work with a couple, when you're working with Lovecraft, you're working with one genius. And then I got to work with Stuart Gordon, and that's working with another genius, so I felt we could try. And, the fact that we were as successful as we were is because we tried our best. Lovecraft's worth your best, because he's, as I said, he's one of the greatest impressionists in American literature, not just in horror, not just in Gothic fiction, but in American literature.
Mm-hmm.
He's a real writer. He spent his life being a writer. He spent his life being tortured as well, being tortured by his own imagination. But he was a writer, and he succeeded in getting his worst fears into print. That's really hard. We hope we succeeded in getting some of our worst fears based on Lovecraft's worst fears onto the screen.
Indeed. I'm getting the note that we're about at the end here. So comes the inevitable question, since you're with the strike now over and you seem to be a bit of an unretired screenwriter at this point. What can you tell us about what else you have coming down the chute? What are you looking at?
When I was on the line picketing for the writer's strike, I went, I think I'm the only person on the line who's both retired and on strike. I mean, it was crazy.
That's good.
But yeah, I'm thrilled to be produced again. I'm thrilled to be working with Barbara again. I'm thrilled to meet and work with Joe. I'd like to do anything. I've got a couple of scripts in the drawer. There are, I want to go back. I want to go back and talk to Brian about a couple of ideas that we couldn't get made back in the day, but that there might be a new way to do it, and in the extending the reanimator myth, the reanimator narrative.
Oh, very cool. Cool, yeah.
Maybe. On the other hand, I don't want to do anything if it's got to speak to you, and sometimes it does, and sometimes it doesn't. Look at Suitable Flesh. The ending of Suitable Flesh isn't really an ending.
For sure, yeah.
It sort of suggests, hey, we have a couple of mad people here. We have a couple of really crazy people left. What could happen to them? So, there's a number of ways to go. I've got a dozen different ideas, and they're in different genres. As I said, I want to, I have a brand. Adapting Lovecraft is sort of my brand, but I don't want to be branded. I want to reach out. There's a lot of things I want to do, but I would love to write. One thing I don't have is my name on the spine of a book. I want to write a book. I want to write, and I've got a couple of horror stories. So, if you go on Amazon and see my name, or if you go into your local bookstore, please go into a local bookstore. And if you see my name on the spine of a book, pick it up and look into it. That could happen. And hopefully that could happen within the next couple of years.
Oh, man, I hope to see some of that, definitely. Well, you've given us a lot to chew on. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
Taking the time.
We do this for you guys. I mean, we do the, you don't make movies so you can sit and watch them yourself. As a matter of fact, it's really hard to watch your own movies if you didn't. But we make them for people who love movies. Just as we used to just as we loved Hitchcock movies, and we loved the Christopher Lee Hammer films, and we love the international Poe adaptations. Stuart and I loved to go to movies together, when we were kids, and all the way through our lives. And hey, if you get a chance, Suitable Flesh has been released to screens. It's gotten a theatrical release. If you can see it on a big screen, see it on a big screen. Look at Joe's work on a big screen. It's worth it.
I second that. Yeah, folks, if you can see it on the big screen, definitely do. I have seen it on the small screen, and I will make sure to see it on the big screen as well.
Yes, please do. That'd be great.
So thank you very much, Dennis. I appreciate you, man. On behalf of Horror DNA, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. We'll talk again sometime.
Yes, sir, we will. Thank you.